I made a decision that morning that was both quiet and heavy, one that no one would ever notice, yet one that carried the weight of a lifetime. I moved my daughter-in-law's chair on her wedding day. To anyone else, it would have seemed like a small, inconsequential act. But in truth, it prevented a humiliation carefully planned in secret. A humiliation aimed at my wife in front of all our family and hundreds of guests. No one had any idea. Not my son, who had been complicit in the plan, not the bride, who believed she was orchestrating the perfect day, and certainly not anyone watching from the sand-lined ceremony. I had seen it all from the beginning, quietly observing. In a wedding that cost hundreds of thousands, the most toxic element wasn't the extravagance. It was the intentions buried in people's hearts. Before I go any further, if you're listening from somewhere across the world, take a moment to subscribe and leave a comment with where you're tuning in from. Stories like this reach farther when we share them. It was early morning, and I sat in my study on the second floor of our Charleston estate. From there, I had a clear view of the beach stretching beneath the rising sun. White chairs were lined perfectly in rows on the sand. Light fabric fluttered softly in the breeze, and everything about the scene was designed to look idyllic. Rehearsal music floated faintly through the air, calm and steady, creating the illusion of a day built entirely on joy. But I knew too well that appearances can be deceptive. Our family did not inherit wealth without hardship. The hotel chain I built came after years of discipline, careful strategy, and relentless focus. My wife, Ella, was the silent partner behind every major decision. She never appeared in headlines or took credit, but her influence shaped every success. Perhaps that's why I always believed this. If someone disrespects Ella, they disrespect the values that built everything we stand for. My youngest son, Kyle, grew up surrounded by privilege, yet often acted as if the world owed him more. The first time he introduced Lauren, I felt an unease I couldn't ignore. She smiled easily, said exactly what she thought people wanted to hear, and carried her phone like an extension of herself. Ella tried to welcome her into the family. She asked questions, gave space, even took blame for minor mishaps. I watched Lauren absorb it all as though it were owed to her. The wedding itself wasn't my choice. Kyle and Lauren had presented a detailed budget, $250,000, and spoke endlessly about image, status, and a celebration that would be remembered forever. Ella remained quiet, nodding only when prompted. I agreed, not because I supported the extravagance, but because I hoped this could be a moment of unity, however fleeting. As the day approached, the unease only grew. Lauren avoided Ella whenever possible. When they did interact, her smiles never reached her eyes. Kyle became irritable, speaking of entitlement and inheritance, of what should belong to him. I'd heard his complaints over the years, but that morning there was a sharp urgency, a kind of impatience that made me uneasy. On the morning of the wedding, I passed the preparation area and overheard laughter spilling from the makeup room. The door was ajar. I wasn't eavesdropping, but the sound of Ella's name made me pause. Lauren's voice rang clear, light, and mocking. She called my wife an old relic, and joked that people like Ella only ruin the front row photos. Then she mentioned a surprise gift, and everyone in the room laughed. I pressed my hand to the wall, feeling a chill creep up my arm, and walked away silently. What unsettled me most wasn't the words, but Kyle's silence. He didn't correct her. He didn't stop the plan. He merely listened, agreeing without a word. Back in the study, I gazed at the ocean. Ella was downstairs, composed and elegant, her shawl adjusted by a friend. She looked serene, unknowing of the trap being laid out just feet away. I thought about how often patience is mistaken for weakness and kindness for vulnerability. Outside, the wedding progressed with every chair ribbon and detail in perfect alignment, but in my mind everything had shifted. I didn't know the full extent of the gift, but I knew it wasn't meant for good. A joke built on humiliation ceases to be a joke. I rose, straightened my vest, and reminded myself of the lessons the military had taught me. First reactions are rarely the right ones. Sometimes the most decisive actions are silent, deliberate, and unseen. I passed through the bustling preparation slowly, observing, waiting, letting the truth reveal itself naturally. The VIP seating was arranged as expected, with Ella's name displayed elegantly on the front row chair. I stopped to confirm. It was all as it should be, or so it appeared. Then I saw her. Lauren emerged, veil removed, scanning the scene as if the world were her stage. She bent toward Ella's chair and, from a small bag, retrieved a bottle of thick, industrial adhesive. I recognized it immediately. My son stood a short distance away, head tilted as if listening to the world with an unreadable expression. He had known about this. He had approved it. Lauren applied the glue carefully, deliberately. Every step was measured. When she was done, she walked away satisfied, leaving the trap in plain sight. Kyle followed, smiling faintly. I did not intervene. My anger never arrived, only clarity. Every piece fell into place. I didn't move immediately. I watched, measured, and waited, letting every gesture, every glance, register in my mind. The ocean breeze carried the faint scent of salt and flowers. the distant hum of the rehearsal music blending with the voices of the staff and early guests. Nothing about the beach looked unusual, but beneath the perfection I could feel the tension tightening like a string. The final preparations were underway. White ribbons flapped lightly over the sand, chairs aligned with military precision. Staff carried trays, adjusted linens, whispered instructions into earpieces. To the casual eye, it was the picture of order. But I knew better. A single misstep, the wrong chair, the wrong person, could turn this meticulously curated celebration into chaos. I bent slightly to inspect Ella's designated seat. The placard with her name gleamed in the morning light. Everything appeared normal. And yet, I could almost see the adhesive drying invisibly across the surface, ready to betray its intended victim. My fingers twitched not from impatience, but anticipation. Years of experience had taught me that the right moment to act is rarely the first one. Timing is everything. Lauren moved through the crowd, flawless and composed. She smiled at passing guests, touched the shoulders of staff, her veil flowing over her shoulders. Not a single observer suspected the trap she had set. Kyle lingered nearby, casual, confident. The kind of self-assurance that masks awareness. He was complicit, I knew that now. He had allowed the plan, watched it unfold, and smiled at its execution. I stepped back, letting the crowd obscure me, and watched Lauren approach the bride's chair at the main table. The golden sunlight struck her dress, illuminating the careful folds, the polish of her preparation. She knelt briefly to adjust the seat, pressing down, testing it without hesitation. My heart did not race. I was calm. The clarity I felt wasn't pride. It was certainty. Years in the military had taught me patience and observation. First reactions often lead to mistakes. Sometimes the most important decisions are the quiet ones made behind the scenes, where no one can see or judge. This was such a moment. I bent low, collected the 2 small placards from Ella's seat and the bride's table, and exchanged them with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it in his mind 100 times. Ella remained downstairs, unaware, surrounded by friends adjusting her shawl and checking small details of her dress. She smiled politely at those around her, completely innocent of the danger she had narrowly avoided. She trusted the world to treat her kindly because that had always been her way. But the world isn't always kind. Some lessons are only learned when boundaries are drawn. The switch was subtle, seamless. No one noticed. Guests were still arriving, conversations continued, and the gentle hum of music filled the gaps between voices. I placed the now swapped placards carefully, stepped back, and blended into the crowd. The trap, intended for Ella, now rested where Lauren herself would later sit. Minutes passed. The ceremony began. Soft instrumental music played as the bride and groom walked to the front. Lauren's confidence was palpable. She believed she had orchestrated everything perfectly, a flawless day built on control and deception. Kyle followed behind her, straight-backed, shoulders squared, his gaze scanning as if seeking my approval. I gave none. I didn't need to. The truth would speak for itself. Ella arrived at the family seating area, elegant, composed, smiling softly at friends and relatives. She had no idea the danger she had narrowly avoided. I caught her eye for a brief moment and nodded slightly, a quiet signal, reassurance without words. She returned the gesture with the calm, confident smile I have known for decades. That single, simple expression carried more strength than the grandest speech ever made. The music softened, guests settled into their seats. The ceremony unfolded as designed: flowers, ribbons, sunlight, and the occasional flash of cameras. Lauren moved with precision, positioning herself at the front table, unaware that her own actions were about to betray her. I kept my distance, observing Kyle as he casually lingered nearby. The documents I had been entrusted with still pressed lightly against my vest. They were forged, copied with precision, containing signatures I had never written but that bore my name. Every detail confirmed the picture I had pieced together that morning. The deception, the greed, the intent. As Lauren leaned toward her seat, hands steady, I felt a calm certainty. The industrial glue she had applied, meant for humiliation, was now in place. My choice had been made without fanfare or anger, but with precision and resolve. When the moment arrived, it would speak louder than any confrontation, louder than any accusation. And then, almost imperceptibly, the ceremony reached the first pause. Guests were quieting for the speeches, for the opening of the commemorative video. Lauren straightened, preparing to sit for the next segment. Her movements were measured, confident, practiced. I didn't move. I didn't intervene. I only watched. The tide of events was now in motion. Every step, every decision would unfold naturally. No one around her suspected a thing. The trap lay ready, invisible yet inevitable, and I had ensured that the wronged party, Ella, would remain untouched. At that moment, I realized something essential. Some confrontations don't require shouting. Some victories are won in silence, in foresight, in the subtle shift of positions no one else notices. And in this silence, I found my resolve. The rest would follow on its own. The ceremony continued, seemingly flawless, with the sun casting a golden glow over the sand and the gentle hum of the ocean in the background. Guests clapped politely, cameras flashed, and every element of the day looked like a perfect celebration. Yet beneath the veneer, tension coiled tightly, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lauren approached the chair she believed was hers, the one she had carefully prepared to humiliate Ella. She bent slightly, fingers brushing the surface, testing it as if nothing could possibly go wrong. Kyle hovered nearby, smiling faintly, his posture casual but deliberate, as though he were confirming that his plan had been executed to perfection. I remained back, calm, watching. The adhesive she had applied was still fresh enough to do exactly what it was intended to do, but this time the victim would not be Ella. I had positioned the seats carefully, ensuring that the trap would expose its true target without endangering anyone innocent. Timing, as always, was everything. Ella was seated a few yards away, unaware, speaking softly with a distant relative, her presence calm, composed, elegant. She had no idea of the tension she had narrowly avoided, and that, I realized, was the greatest testament to patience and dignity, enduring the ignorance of others' malice while remaining unshakably poised. As the MC began the next segment, a commemorative video of family memories, Lauren readied herself to sit fully. She placed her hands on the edges of the chair, confident and sure, expecting the next round of applause. Then, just as she leaned down, her dress caught slightly and a soft tearing sound broke the calm. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, a dry, stubborn pull that betrayed her expectations. A few guests nearby glanced around, unsure what had happened. Kyle instinctively leaned forward, whispering, trying to coax her into standing. She shook her head, panic flickering across her expression for the first time that day. I didn't move. I didn't intervene. My hands were calm at my sides, my breathing steady. This was the moment where preparation, observation, and patience came together. Lauren's confidence wavered as she realized something was wrong, and the sound grew louder. The fabric of her gown, so meticulously arranged, resisted her movements, revealing the sabotage she herself had set in motion. The room fell into silence, a thick, almost tangible pause. Phones hovered in the air, cameras ready, but the audience hesitated, sensing something had gone off script. Kyle's hand remained frozen over the back of the chair, uncertain, unable to undo the unfolding consequences. Lauren's face drained of color as comprehension dawned. She was no longer in control. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and took the microphone from the MC, whose hands shook slightly. The murmurs quieted almost immediately. The entire hall's attention turned toward me, yet I didn't rush or yell. I spoke clearly, deliberately, each word measured. I believe it's time to pause. Every eye in the room focused on me. I kept my gaze steady, not looking at Ella, who remained seated calmly, but at Lauren. I didn't need anger or theatrics. Certainty carried far more weight than either. You once said this wedding should be unforgettable. I continued, voice calm, deliberate. You were right. It will be. I let a moment pass, long enough for the tension to settle in every chest. Lauren's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Kyle, beside her, blinked rapidly, searching for some control, some way to steer the situation back to normal. I lifted the papers from my vest pocket, the forged will, the transfer documents Kyle had entrusted to me. I held them up without opening them, letting the sight speak for itself. Every signature, every line was intended to deceive, to take what was not theirs. A murmur ran through the guests. Some whispered to neighbors, others simply stared, frozen by disbelief. The ocean waves outside, distant yet constant, seemed louder now, underscoring the weight of what had been revealed without a single raised voice. Lauren's hands tightened around the edges of the chair, her composure crumbling as she realized the magnitude of her own actions. Kyle's shoulders slumped, the first trace of understanding flickering across his features. No one needed to shout. The silence itself carried judgment, an unspoken verdict more powerful than any speech. Ella remained calm as always. I took my seat beside her, lightly resting my hand on hers. She didn't ask anything. She didn't need to. That quiet acknowledgement was enough. Years of endurance, patience, and integrity had been validated in a single unspoken moment. Event staff began moving discreetly, gathering information and preparing to document the situation, but without urgency or spectacle. There was no chaos. Only the quiet understanding that boundaries had been crossed, and now consequences were unavoidable. The reception, so carefully planned, had shifted subtly into a space of accountability. Kyle and Lauren, for the first time, faced the weight of their actions without intervention, without distraction. They would understand responsibility in a way no speech or reprimand could ever teach. I leaned back, my heart steady. I had not acted out of revenge, only foresight. The day would continue, but the lesson had been delivered. Sometimes, silence and subtlety achieve more than confrontation or anger ever could. The room remained heavy with silence. Guests, unsure how to react, lingered at their tables, eyes shifting between the main table and the couple, then quickly away. The music had stopped entirely, leaving only the faint sound of the waves outside and the occasional clink of cutlery. The celebration had paused, suspended between appearances and the reality that had quietly taken center stage. Kyle and Lauren remained at the main table, She still sat in the chair she had prepared to humiliate someone else, now trapped by the very scheme she had set in motion. Her hands rested on the edges, fingers trembling slightly, her carefully maintained composure unraveling. Kyle stood beside her, shoulders tense, eyes darting around for some way to regain control. But there was none. I walked over slowly, not with anger, not with triumph, but with the same calm certainty I had maintained all morning. I lowered my voice, speaking only to them. Today was never meant for arguments. It was meant for understanding. You will remain here, take responsibility for what has been done, and ensure that the aftermath is handled properly. Not as punishment, but as accountability. Kyle's face tightened. He searched for a retort, for some excuse, but his words faltered in the silence. Lauren finally looked down, her eyes wet, her voice gone. The enormity of what they had attempted, and failed to execute, pressed on them with undeniable force. I returned to Ella's side, taking her hand lightly. She didn't ask me questions. She didn't need to. Her quiet presence, calm and steady, carried the reassurance that had always guided me. In that moment, I realized something profound. The measure of a person is often revealed not by their words, but by how they carry themselves in the face of deliberate malice. Event staff moved closer, quietly documenting what was necessary, ensuring no legal detail was overlooked. Kyle and Lauren complied, their movements hesitant, unhurried, yet without dispute. There was no spectacle, no dramatic confrontation. The truth and the natural consequences of deception were sufficient. Later, as twilight softened the sky, I walked Ella down to the beach. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only the faint glow of lanterns along the terrace and the gentle shimmer of waves. There was no music, no cameras, no applause. Only the wind, the sand, and the quiet sense of order restored. We danced slowly, without rhythm or ceremony, taking a few careful steps across the sand. I didn't speak of the morning, the glue, the forged documents, or the exposure. None of it needed words. The world had already acknowledged the balance of actions and consequences. Sometimes, I realized, the right ending isn't about reversing events or erasing harm. It's about ensuring that integrity, patience, and respect are preserved. It's about putting everything back in its rightful place, allowing those who caused harm to see, and perhaps finally understand, the weight of their actions. Kyle and Lauren remained at the estate later that night, clearing tables and chairs along with a few staff members. No supervision was necessary. Some lessons are only learned when someone is forced to reckon with the consequences themselves. When we returned to the house, the terrace lights were dimmed. The estate grew quiet. I looked at Ella and saw the faintest smile, the kind of smile reserved for someone who has endured, for someone finally shielded from deliberate harm. Her patience, which had seemed endless to some, had not been in vain. I stood for a moment on the balcony, reflecting on the day. The chair, the documents, the silence that had spoken louder than any words could. I understood clearly what I had long known: wealth can create a lavish event, but it cannot buy respect. Greed can orchestrate appearances, but it cannot manufacture dignity. Family, I realized, is not about entitlement or appearances. It is about responsibility, boundaries, and the quiet understanding of one another's worth. And if someone tries to exploit those principles, they are the ones left exposed, no matter how perfect they believe the day to be. I took one last look at the ocean, the sand, the empty chairs, and thought about the choice between forgiveness and setting limits. I chose boundaries that night, not in anger, but in clarity. Respect, after all, is not given, it is maintained. And as the estate settled into darkness, I knew this: some lessons cannot be ignored, some truths cannot be hidden, and some acts of patience eventually bear the weight of justice. Silently, deliberately, and with the precision of a life lived long enough to understand the value of observing before acting. Money can buy a grand celebration, but it cannot buy the loyalty, integrity, or respect that holds a family together. And that is what mattered most. Long after the chairs were cleared, the guests departed, and the night returned to its quiet, unassuming rhythm.